And if you don't believe that, it gets even worse. They say you'll return with nothing to learn, without the rest of your life in reverse.
Somewhere between night and day, she emerges anew from the mist on the bay, where the sea meets the land as they always had planned. I see Elowen Maya de Grey. In the moonlit haze she takes form, out of the chaos where silence is born. She walks in between the worlds that she dreams, forever recurringly drawn. Lonesome, she walks on the shore, where the sea called her name so often before. Like tidings foretold, faint footprints of old, guided by echoes of yore. As though she stepped into a fresh, unmarked page, with the sands smoothly planed like an empty-lit stage, its grains newly patterned, then scored and flattened by the scribe of the sea rearranged. Urged to move forwards like the tide by the moon, a piper at dawn with his hypnotic tune, with the fog slightly clearing, cracked shells now appearing like fragments of memories strewn. She walks on through symbols the shoreline composes, shells and small stones the new tide transposes, those songs of old, secrets retold, in the meaning the ocean discloses. A watcher sits on the clock tower high, observing the scene, patrolling the sky, sent by the keeper to raise up the sleeper when the waking hour was nigh. And so the ritual began its reprise, to catch the stone that fell from the skies, with the glow of the moon in the space of the tune, a rest in the sea's lullaby. The verses recursively styled on the sand, concertedly made by the sea and the land. The melody spoke ancient tales of folk whose stories weren't written by hand. She cast out her sights and let her eyes drift, trawling the debris of a wrecked fishing skiff. Then catching her eye by that old hook and line, she remembered the mark where the moonstone would hit. And in that mark, named the Hollow, Elowen found a charged static hush that gathered around. Then the stone fell to earth, and with all she was worth, she caught it before it touched ground. She felt the full force, with the stone held secure, her feet sunken down in the soft, sandy shore. In that moment, still calm, sat there in her palm the most beautiful stone she'd seen before. She felt her heart beating as she held that stone tight, relieved to have caught it from such a great height, dropped from the stars, straight into her arms, an inevitable earthbound flight. In the moon's spotlight, she held that stone fast. She felt like she wanted to bow with the cast of pebble and shell that had guided her well. She wished that this feeling forever would last. Onwards she went, more footprints in sand, writing the tale that was already planned. The fog had been lifting, now something was shifting, a feeling uneasy, a tug of her hand.
Should you hold the stone from lunar hewn, these words will echo back to you. Place at the heart of pebbled ground, the mirrored moon will draw it down.
She was drawn up the causeway, no choice could she make, the past always pulling her on in its wake. She knew that her stone would pave her way home, yet a feeling, foreboding, she just couldn't shake. A little ahead, the loop lay in wait, urgently calling her on to her fate. With the moon overhead, more quick she did tread, and the sea coming in, she couldn't be late. The loop is an ancient, mysterious thing, reflective inside of its pebble-linked ring. When the moon is on show, directly below, the loop deeply draws that lunar stone in. And if you pay the fare the loop asks, the Ouroboros comes and takes you back to the start. A cycle unending, a soul needing mending, forever, never completing its arc. Looking back on the scene at the oncoming waves, the old skiff now covered the notes and the staves. An unsettling feeling had started unreeling, the image distorting, the sound out of phase. She felt the essence of time closing in, with the moon waxing fast. Now she had to begin, the stone placing right, on a clear moonlit night. Now she stood on the edge of the loop's outer ring, waiting patiently for that moment in time, knowing this moment forever divined. She looked to the moon to see if it soon would sit in the circle, truly aligned. Just out beyond the edge of the cove, up on the banking and over the road, stood the station hotel with its clock tower bell, the warm lights invoking a homely abode. From the whole of the bay you could see the clock shine, but a statuesque owl sat eclipsing the time. What could always be seen were its eyes glowing green. She thought they were following her, reading her mind. Ever so carefully, offering gently, she laid down the stone she caught so reverently, with the moon clear and bright on this sacred cold night. The ritual should be elementary. The moon took its path out in space, its reflection now nearly in place. With her stone held and poised, a sudden strange noise caused her to lift up her face. An alarming shrill squawking cried out from the tower. She could now see the clock, and for the first time its hour. And the statue? Unseen. No eyes of bright green. As a causal reaction, she motioned to cower. The fear rising in her filled her with surprise, as she realized no statue could make such a cry. With the moon centered now, she saw that great owl gliding in circles above in the sky. She brought herself back to the matter in hand. The stone that she held she laid down as planned, but the owl's silhouette flew overhead, its wings spread out wide to reach their full span. The watcher flew over. El saw his reflection, its shadow cast over, breaking the connection. The stone didn't sink when the owl broke the link, a fatefully timely dissection. In that moment, it felt like all time had stood still. Was this even happening? Was this even real? This part in the play shouldn't happen this way. She just stayed there, frozen, continuing to kneel. As the lights started fading on the station hotel, the fear creeping in her had started to swell. The moonstone intact, in the loop there still sat, as just then, all around her, a cold darkness fell.
The Ouroboros snakes round the town. Its route is a circle that keeps going round.
The station hotel, built back in time for weary train travellers to sleep for the night. Yet over the years, less trains have appeared, and now there's not one left in sight. The sea rushing in now faster than ever, the structure collapsing of this failed endeavour. There was no time to waste, she had to make haste. If she wanted to flee, it was right now, or never. Not knowing why, but without any doubt, she plunged in her hand and pulled the stone out. With the moon now enshrouded behind gathering cloud, there was nowhere to hide, no turning about. She ran to the single path out of the bay, up on the banking still running away, as she dared to look back, by that old bus stop shack, her mind filled with confusion and her heart with dismay. She crossed over to the hotel, her feet wet and sore. She tried to recall walking this platform before. Then she stopped in her tracks. She had to turn back. That ill-described inn had bricked up its door. She stood in the darkness, confused and alone. All that she wanted to do was go home, but she didn't know how, or if she could now. So she sat in the shelter, just her and the stone. She hoped the Ouroboros bus would pass by here soon, before this cold darkness turned her mind loon. She thought of that owl, and his actions so foul. It must be that bird who blocked out the moon. Her anger grew hotter and started to burn.
It's that owl's fault!
But these raging thoughts she tried to adjourn.
But why?
If the loop didn't work, when it all went berserk, how could she ever now try to return? Just then, away some, she heard the bus engine's sound. Thank heavens for that, she thought she'd been found. She got up to stand and held out her hand, but the wheels on that bus just kept going round. She felt in her hand the weight of the stone. As the stagecoach got closer, she thought about home, but the bus wasn't slowing, and now it was going. Once more, she was left in the darkness, alone. Her hope had turned into despair. Why did the bus leave her stuck, stranded there? Would nobody help her, sat in that bus shelter? Why did nobody care? Sat back on that cold bench with the heaviest heart, just her in a world now made even more stark. She didn't know what to do. Then a soft twitter-woo. She saw two eyes shining green in the dark. The owl sat on a signpost next to the hotel. Elowen's anger once more did swell. She clutched her stone tight, come whatever might, and she threw her moonstone with all the fury of hell. The stone that was thrown was hurtling with force. The owl, with keen eye, stopped its flight in his claws. She stood there in pique, too angry to speak. But what happened next gave her reason to pause. The luniformed stone lit up like a flare. She could now see the owl hold her stone in the air. He then flew to the bus stop, where he let that bright stone drop, with guided momentum, back into her care. She caught the stone easily, an accurate throw. He answered her wrath with the gift he'd bestow, and as things became clearer, she brought the stone nearer and wondered with awe at its lustrous glow.
If you now stand by high tide's edge, the loop denied your moonless pledge. The station lights no longer glow. Now you must find your own way home.
Something had changed. Something was afoul. Elowen de Grey was entangled somehow
So strange.
with the Watcher in light from the moonstone so bright. She could now clearly see him, the green-eyed owl. She approached him with some trepidation, yet somehow felt no separation. Her fear would subside as she saw in its eyes the light of her mind's liberation. This new act playing out more like improvisation. She couldn't rely on past recitation. She heard herself say, "Please, bird, I pray, I'm lost with this strange situation." She spoke now softly and graciously slow. The stone in her hand continued to glow. With this new light she found, she saw her feet on the ground, and with a deep inward breath, she decided to go. Elowen now filled with a newfound resolve. The loop had no power, its system dissolved. A rare voice from inside whispered, "Follow the guide into the part of the story untold." She walked to the owl who sat there benign, sitting now back on his directional sign. The orientation clear, yet as she drew near, the owl flew up over the railway line. She was slightly bemused, a bit taken aback, but followed him over that rusty old track, past the sidings forlorn, the last train long gone, then out through a crumbling boundary wall crack. Her path, now a field, stretched out long and wide, with even more fields spread alongside. Her destination unsure, but the owl took the fall, as she strode on, keeping him always in sight. She followed the Watcher, now become guide, who flew on ahead by yonder hillside. She kept her eyes peeled from her place in the field, a distance apart, though inevitably tied. The clouds were dispersing from the morning skies as the moon and the stars waved their tired goodbyes, a hint of the dawn, of this fresh, new-lit morn, as the daytime uncloaked its nightly disguise. Elowen pushed on at steeper incline, eager to see this land bathed in sunshine. She trudged up the hill, with the owl in sight still. Their thoughts and directions now seemed to align. Further and further she kept climbing higher. Occasionally stumbling, she was starting to tire. The sun climbing too, about to break through. She reached the peak as the sky lit its fire. She hadn't felt sunlight for years, as it melted away the last of her fears. A new day was dawning, with the sound of the morning rising once more to her ears. For a moment she stood in the warmth of that sun and thought about where this all had begun. Here, once again, at the start of an end, with a new song still yet to be sung. From the top of the hill she could see where she'd been, but when she turned back around, a whole brand new scene. So she then made her way down the path to the bay, by the side of a sea-headed stream. The Watcher and guide above her did fly, and then rested to perch on a rock jutting by. As Elowen sighed, a peace now imbibed, she noticed a sailing boat there on the shoreline. She dragged her tired feet slowly toward the calm, lapping waves where the wooden boat moored. Now, just in reach, she took leave of the beach, and with the last of her strength, she clambered on board. Weary now, barely able to stand, she looked out to sea, then once more the land, then laid herself down with her feet at the bow and drifted away with the stone in her hand. Then, just for a moment, she opened her eyes and saw the Watcher swoop down from the skies. With the force of a gale, he set the boat sail. to the sea where tranquility lies.